the booms and busts. Our philosophy on reduction of poverty has been take advantage of the trickle-down effect in the economy. We actually let 50 million of our brothers and sisters to depend on the trickle-down effect of the economy. So by the time you have grown for 3, 4, 5 years, obviously your economy has grown. So the trickle starts reaching the poor. And by the time, obviously there's a bust, that trickle goes away and they fall below the poverty line again. So if you see the demographics around the poverty line, preponderance of your population is around the poverty line of $1 per day. And so what happens is the growth of 4 or 5 years, the people just go above that, and the minute the growth rate falls, they fall below that, and that is what explains 17% poverty in 2005, and again 32% in 2008-9, because obviously the economy bust in 2007-8 and 2008-9. So poverty levels and unemployment, and clearly most of the poverty lives in the rural areas, and hence and this is, we even don't capture that. When we talk about 5.3% or 5.2% and 5.5% unemployment, ladies and gentlemen, we are not actually capturing, because most of the unemployment which is in the rural sectors is not even accounted for. We have then, because we have no resources, we do not spend money on our social sector. Our social sector, as I think Naqvi Saab said, 2.5 to 3%. It was 2%, 2.1%, 8, 9, and frankly 9, 10. We budgeted to be 3%. I hope they have met the 3%. If not, it is shameful. This year, of course, the pendulum shifts, because this moves towards the provinces, but this is one area. If you do not educate the most valuable resource you have, the resources which Japan has used to become the second largest economy in the world, which Singapore uses to have a per capita of $50,000. I mean, they have what? They have only human resources. And we have 175 to 180 million brilliant people. And when I say brilliant, I'm talking about experience, through experience. I used to manage 24 nationalities while I used to be country manager in Dubai. And let me tell you, by God, there is nobody like us. Because we have the aggression, the initiative, the intellect, and the hard work. And not many nations have that. And despite that, when we are outside, we are best bankers, or we are very good engineers, and we are very good doctors. We just do not give the same level playing field to our people here in our own country. And that is because we just do not have the kind of governance which I think has been highlighted. We clearly, do not spend then money on agriculture. We do not spend, and when we talk about agriculture, and I think, somebody said, we are really dependent on the rainfalls and others. Let me tell you what we have been doing in agriculture. It is absolutely a criminal neglect, over the last, 50, 60 years. In the 60s, the average growth rate in our, for that decade, the average growth rate was close to 6%. It was 5.5%. So every decade that has dropped by 1%, and it is over 1% now for this decade. It's around 1.5% or so. Isn't it a shame? Isn't it a shame? In 2001, the cotton production with India and Pakistan was the same at 12.5 million bales. Today they are 31 million, and we are still 12.7 million. Isn't it a shame that, our, sucrose content, of our sugar cane is at 8.5, 9%, and China is 17%? Isn't it a shame that the wheat production, average wheat production in Pakistan is 28 mounds per acre? And I think it has been stagnant for a very, very long time, and we have done nothing about it. Isn't it a shame this country, which in the Punjab of India used to feed the entire India, that we had to import wheat? I think it's shameful, but this is a fact. Then we talk about, manufacturing and, trade. I think look at, what has happened to our manufacturing and trade. I think a lot of things have been mentioned over here, and it's absolutely a fact. A segment which contributes 18% to this GDP actually contributes over 65%, to the taxes, which means nobody else pays taxes. And we have neglected that. Infrastructure, capital markets, and administration and governance. Our governance, the institutions are deteriorated. If you look at our civil service and everybody else, government is no longer employer of choice. Nobody in their right mind will go and work. They don't have an option, they will go otherwise. So how do we address these? Do we just basically be complacent? Absolutely not. I think this is when I joined as a finance minister, we got people together, eminent people, economists, agriculturists, social scientists, industrialists, and you just name it. And we just only saw, you said, the competence level of those people. And we sat down and we prepared a 9-point agenda, a very comprehensive 9-point agenda, which said, to start with, let's basically bring a macroeconomic stability. And you cannot have macroeconomic stability with 25% inflation, with the reserves equal to only 1 month of imports, with current account deficit of 8.6%, fiscal deficit of 7.6%. No way you can have macroeconomic stability and a falling exchange rate. So we basically said, first and foremost is you basically increase tax to GDP ratio. Now, whatever steps, and I think the way to move forward was not only improve the effectiveness of the tax machinery, and let me tell you, it's quite creaky. I mean, it is unacceptable, the level of performance of FBR over the last many decades. But then there were policy areas which basically had to be plugged. There was no basically tax on capital gains on real estate. We put out a CBT which was regressive. I mean, how does CBT relate? The reason was it is a provincial tax. And when we said we would just put tax on capital gains, all the provinces last year, somebody said, oh, distributed on population, the other side on revenue, third side on inverse population density, because everybody had their own a kind of stance on distribution of these revenues. So we said, let's put a CBT, and next year, so which means this year, I was expecting that should be taken away, the CBT, and a capital gains tax of 10, 20%, whatever, should be levied on the actual capital gains on real estate. But that was introduced last year. Then we introduced tax on service, sales tax on services, 4 of them. But we said we will expand next year. So that was plugged last year. And they have now expanded to 20 now, this time. Third was the capital gains, tax on, shares and stock exchanges. That has been introduced. It was decided before I left. And I hope that the government removes those kind of regressive things like, withholding taxes and all those, which these guys are still paying. And the fourth has been really, I've been crying hoarse by saying the agriculturists will also have to pay taxes. Unless each and every one of us who has an income of 300,000 rupees doesn't pay taxes, this is not, the level playing field. And let me tell you, I have a problem. There are 2 major lobbies over here, and they are not willing to just basically come to, one lobby has one political, party, and the other has the other political party. One does not want to pay agriculture tax, and the other lobby doesn't want to pay the retail tax. Both of them, agriculturists pay less than ₹1 billion in this entire country, and the retailers pay only 75 million rupees in this entire country. How can they justify that? How can they justify that they basically are living over here, they're using the roads and they're using everything else, even if these are, basically inefficient systems? There is a buzzword now going around in the West. No representation without taxation. Pay your taxes first, then stand up and say, we are not getting, the services which we require. And change the people when the election comes, because you now have votes. But you can't just run around and say, oh, because I am not getting the proper kind of, I'm not getting electricity, water, this and that, and so I'm not going to pay taxes. It doesn't work like that, I said, we have to now stand up and be counted. I think so our target should be that we go and increase our tax to GDP by 1% every year. From 10%, 10.2, we go to 15%.